Throughout millennia, Earth has preserved traces of a past we still do not fully understand. Forgotten monuments, impossible objects, civilizations that left behind more questions than answers. Today, I invite you to journey through these mysteries that defy time and reason. Relax, get comfortable, and let yourself be carried away by the oldest secrets of the world. The Walls of Sacsayhuamán, the impossible fortress of the Andes. High above Cusco, more than 3,600 meters, 11,800 feet, above sea level, lies one of the most impressive archaeological complexes of the ancient world, Sacsayhuamán. A series of stone walls that have withstood centuries of relentless weather, earthquakes, and the passage of time, leaving behind more questions than answers. Built by the Inca civilization, Sacsayhuamán is not merely a display of monumental architecture. For many, it is a true enigma of engineering. The walls are composed of enormous stone blocks, some weighing over 150 tons. What is most astonishing is the way these blocks were cut and fitted together, without the use of mortar, fitting so precisely that not even a knife blade can be inserted between the stones. The perfect fitting of the stones has allowed the walls to endure numerous earthquakes that have struck the region, standing firm with minimal damage, while later colonial constructions, built with more modern techniques, have crumbled. The origin of Sacsayhuamán dates back to the reign of Inca Pachacutec in the 15th century. However, some archaeologists suggest that parts of the complex could be even older, possibly the work of cultures that predated the Incas, although historical records are unclear on this point. The technique used to move and assemble these massive stones remains a subject of debate. No written records describing the process have been found, and the tools available to the Incas, made of stone, bronze, and wood, seem insufficient to explain the level of precision achieved. One theory holds that the stones were carved at the quarries using harder rocks as hammers, then polished through constant abrasion. Transportation may have involved the use of earthen ramps, wooden rollers, and the organized human labor of large groups. Another, more speculative hypothesis suggests that the builders might have employed now-forgotten techniques, such as softening the stone using natural substances. Although intriguing, this idea lacks solid archaeological evidence. Beyond construction methods, the very design of Sacsayhuamán is fascinating. The walls zigzag, forming jagged lines that grant additional seismic resistance. Each stone was individually shaped to fit perfectly with its neighbors, creating a structure that is both resilient and aesthetically striking. The overall shape of the complex has also been subject to interpretation. From the air, some observers have suggested that the layout of the walls resembles the silhouette of a puma, a sacred animal for the Incas. In addition to the walls, the site includes terraces, ceremonial plazas, and underground structures, many of which have yet to be fully excavated or understood. During the Spanish conquest, Sacsayhuamán was the scene of decisive battles. In 1536, the Incas rebelled against the conquistadors, using the fortress as one of their last strongholds. After the Inca defeat, much of the smaller stones were dismantled and reused in the construction of churches and colonial buildings in Cusco. Despite this destruction, the largest blocks, impossible to move with colonial-era technology, remained in place, allowing us to admire their magnitude today. For the Incas, Sacsayhuamán was not simply a military fortress. It also had profound ceremonial importance. Rituals and religious celebrations, such as the Inti Raymi, the Great Festival of the Sun, were held there. And to this day, it is commemorated annually in Cusco, evoking ancient traditions. The combination of military, ceremonial, and astronomical aspects makes Sacsayhuamán a multifaceted testament to the Inca culture, which saw the world as an interconnected whole between the human, the natural, and the divine. From an archaeological perspective, Sacsayhuamán remains an active field of research. Each new excavation reveals fragments of its history, from tools and offerings to underground passageways that suggest a complexity far greater than what is visible on the surface. Despite the centuries that have passed, the walls of Sacsayhuamán continue to astonish not only because of their size or age, but because of the mystery they exude. Walking alongside its gigantic stones, one cannot help but wonder how a civilization without knowledge of the wheel or heavy draft animals could have created such a marvel. Today, the site is one of Peru's main tourist attractions and has been recognized as a UNESCO World Cultural Heritage Site. From the heights of Sacsayhuamán, the view over Cusco is breathtaking. The city's layout, the mountains on the horizon, and the titanic walls still standing combine to create an experience that transports visitors to ancient times. More than just a relic of the past, Sacsayhuamán is a living proof of the intelligence, perseverance, and vision of the Andean builders. A place where stone, art, and ingenuity came together to challenge time, leaving us a work that continues to invite admiration and quiet reflection, without needing to delve into forced or convoluted interpretations. Simply, a tangible legacy that has endured centuries of history and still stands, firm and silent, high in the Andes. The Ulfberht Viking swords, steel ahead of its time. Between the 9th and 11th centuries, the seas and rivers of Europe were sailed by the Vikings, warriors and explorers who left their mark across the continent. Among the weapons they wielded, there exists a type of sword that has puzzled historians and archaeologists alike: the Ulfberht swords. At first glance, Ulfberht swords seem similar to other Viking swords of the time. Straight blades, double-edged, simple hilts. But in reality, they hide a mystery that makes them unique: the extraordinary quality of their steel. Discovered in tombs, rivers, and battlefields across Europe, around 170 swords bear the inscription plus Ulfberht plus on their blades. A simple engraving, yet one that marks a significant difference. For centuries, the steel of these swords has been regarded as far superior to that of contemporary weapons. While most Viking swords were forged with carbon steel of varying quality, the Ulfberhts display a level of purity in their material that, technically, should not have existed in medieval Europe. Modern metallurgical analysis has shown that Ulfberht steel contains a very low amount of impurities, particularly slag, and a high carbon content, characteristics typical of crucible steel. Crucible steel, later associated with Damascus steel, was an advanced product originally manufactured in India and the Middle East. In Europe, techniques to produce steel of similar quality did not emerge until centuries later, during the Industrial Revolution. How, then, were Viking blacksmiths able to obtain such advanced material? One possibility is that the steel was imported via trade routes connecting Europe to the Islamic world and Central Asia. The Vikings were not only warriors, they were also active traders, and it is possible that high-quality steel reached them as an exotic and valuable commodity. Another theory suggests that certain European smiths may have, through trial and error, developed their own methods to purify iron to levels far superior to what was common at the time. Whatever the origin of the material, forging a Ulfberht sword was no simple task. The blacksmith had to heat the steel to extremely high temperatures, maintain the precise carbon balance, and forge a blade that was both flexible and strong, capable of withstanding blows without breaking. Each Ulfberht sword was a masterpiece of its time. Lighter, stronger, and sharper than ordinary swords, it gave its bearer a considerable advantage in combat. The name Ulfberht, engraved on the blades, likely does not refer to a single smith, but rather to a lineage of master forgers or a prestigious workshop. Over time, the name may have become a brand, a guarantee of quality that others tried to imitate. Indeed, swords with defective or altered inscriptions have been found, indicating that counterfeits existed. Attempts to capitalize on the fame of the true Ulfberht swords by selling inferior weapons. The differences between authentic Ulfberht swords and the imitations are stark under modern analysis. While the genuine ones show homogeneous, hard, and flexible steel, the copies display visible slag and a much more fragile metallic structure. The contexts in which these swords have been found also reveal much about their value. Many were discovered in the graves of wealthy warriors, suggesting that owning an Ulfberht was a symbol of high status. It was not merely a weapon, it was an object of prestige, reserved for the powerful. The geographic distribution of the sword spans from Scandinavia to Central and Western Europe, following the routes of Viking raids, trade, and settlements. The name Ulfberht is of Germanic origin, and some researchers have suggested that the original workshops may have been located in the Rhine region, in what is now Germany. There, under the influence of the Carolingian Empire, centers of fine arms production flourished, possibly establishing trade links with the Vikings. The Ulfberht swords represent, in many ways, a crossroads between cultures. European metallurgical skill, imported steel from distant lands, and Viking warrior craftsmanship, a combination that produced one of the finest weapons of its time. Today, Ulfberht swords are preserved in museums around the world. Their blades still shine under display lights, bearing rough yet powerful inscriptions, testaments to a time when steel was both a tool of war and a symbol of power. The mystery of their exact manufacture remains open. Despite modern studies, we still do not fully understand how such consistent quality was achieved in an era with limited technological means. Perhaps that is part of the Ulfberht's enduring fascination. Beyond their technical perfection, they represent an age of discovery, unexpected cultural contacts, and artisans whose knowledge went beyond what recorded history tells us. A time when a warrior's worth was measured not only by his strength or courage, but also by the weapon he wielded. Today, looking closely at an Ulfberht sword, it is easy to imagine the blacksmith patiently working the glowing steel, striking it again and again, forging not just a weapon, but a legend, an object that, centuries later, still leaves its mark, reminding us that even in so-called primitive times, human skill and ingenuity achieved extraordinary feats. The skeletons of Roopkund Lake, the frozen mystery of the Himalayas. At more than 5,000 meters above sea level, hidden among the snowy peaks of the Himalayas, lies a small mountain lake known as Roopkund. At first glance, it appears like many other remote high-altitude places in India. Serene, isolated, surrounded by snow and mist. But Roopkund holds a chilling secret that has puzzled explorers and scientists for nearly a century. Hundreds of human skeletons scattered around its shores. The story of Roopkund Lake came to light in 1942, when a British forest ranger, while patrolling the area, found large quantities of skeletal remains floating in the shallow waters and strewn along the banks. The colonial authorities, alarmed, ordered an immediate investigation, fearing they might be recent victims, possibly of conflict or mass murder. However, it soon became clear that the bones were ancient. The state of preservation, combined with the cold and dry environment, had allowed the remains to endure for centuries. Theories about the origin of the skeletons were as varied as they were imaginative. Some thought they were soldiers from General Zorawar Singh's army, who attempted to invade Tibet in the 19th century and perished due to harsh weather. Others suggested they were pilgrims who had died during a religious procession caught in a storm. But scientific dating conducted over the following decades disproved these hypotheses. Radiocarbon analyses revealed that the skeletons were much older, dating back to the 9th century AD. This opened new questions. Who were these people? Why were they traveling through such a harsh region? What caused their deaths? The site offers few immediate clues. There are no signs of combat. The skeletons show no weapon-related injuries. However, many of the skulls present severe fractures, all located on the tops of the heads, as if struck by blunt objects falling from above. In addition to human remains, fragments of clothing, jewelry, wooden sandals, and simple tools were found, suggesting that the travelers were not soldiers but a mixed group of men, women, and children. Modern investigations, including DNA studies and isotopic analysis, have provided fascinating details. The skeletons belong to different genetic groups. Most individuals show ancestry typical of South Asia, but a separate group exhibits genetic traits closer to populations from the Eastern Mediterranean, including Greece and Crete. This discovery further puzzled researchers. How could it be that, in the 9th century, people from such distant regions ended up together in a remote Himalayan corner? Studies of footwear, clothing, and artifacts reinforced the idea that they were pilgrims, people who, for religious or cultural reasons, undertook a harsh journey toward a sacred destination. One of the most accepted hypotheses today is that Roopkund was part of an ancient pilgrimage route leading to mountain sanctuaries revered by local cultures since ancient times. The death of the group, according to the skeletal evidence, appears to have been caused by a catastrophic hailstorm. Hailstones the size of baseballs would have struck the travelers directly, causing lethal head injuries. Without shelter in the open terrain, trapped in a mountain pass without protection, many would have died instantly, while others succumb to the cold, lack of aid, and severe wounds. The existence of local legends, passed down orally through generations, supports this theory. The story of the goddess Nanda Devi, in particular, tells of a group of pilgrims who desecrated her sacred mountain and were punished by a deadly rain of stones falling from the sky. Although these accounts were long considered purely mythological, the discoveries at Roopkund suggest they might have a real historical basis. In modern times, Roopkund Lake has become a destination for extreme adventurers and trekkers. It is not an easy place to reach. The air is thin, temperatures plummet dramatically, and the weather shifts unpredictably. Those who manage to arrive find a desolate landscape. During the coldest months, the lake remains frozen. But when the ice partially melts, the bones emerge once again, silently recalling the tragedy that unfolded over 1,000 years ago. Research continues. New genetic analyses, geological studies, and refined datings aim to reconstruct more precisely what happened and who all the members of the group were. But beyond the scientific details, Roopkund Lake has captured the collective imagination for other reasons. Few sites are as striking as that of a high-altitude lake, calm and isolated, where hundreds of skeletons lie, silent witnesses to an ancient disaster. A place that was not a battlefield or a monumental construction site, but rather a scene of human tragedy frozen in time. Today, Roopkund remains a partially solved mystery, a story of hope, faith, and fatality frozen in the chill of the Himalayas. A reminder, perhaps, of how small humankind can be before the unpredictable forces of nature. The Osirion, the hidden temple beneath Egypt's sands. In the Egyptian city of Abydos, a sacred place where the gods were worshipped for millennia, lies a structure that baffles even the most seasoned experts, the Osirion. This enigmatic monument, half buried below the current ground level, doesn't quite fit into conventional Egyptian architecture. In fact, the Osirion appears different in style, technique, and purpose, almost as if it belonged to a forgotten era or a different civilization altogether. Discovered in the early 20th century, the Osirion was found behind the Great Temple of Seti I, one of the most renowned pharaohs of the 19th dynasty. At first glance, it might seem like just another part of Abydos's ceremonial complex, but doubts soon arose. The structure of the Osirion is unique. Enormous limestone and red granite blocks, placed with millimetric precision, forming deep chambers, passageways, and a central pit that remains flooded for most of the year. The construction technique is more reminiscent of methods used in much older monuments, such as those on the Giza Plateau. The stones used are colossal, some weighing over 50 tons, crafted with an impressively smooth finish. The massive, austere style of the Osirion sharply contrasts with the more elaborate and decorative architecture of Seti I's temple. This has led many archaeologists to ask, was it really built during Seti's reign, or are we looking at a much older structure that later pharaohs simply repurposed? The depth of the Osirion adds another layer to the enigma. While Seti's temple sits at the current ground level, the Osirion lies many meters below. To have built it at that depth would have required deep excavation, something uncommon in historical Egyptian architecture. Some researchers suggest that when the Osirion was built, the water table was much lower than today, and the site would have been dry. Others believe that water was intentionally part of the ritual design, representing the primordial waters from the Egyptian creation myth. Indeed, in mythology, Osiris, the god of resurrection and the afterlife, is closely tied to water and the cycles of death and rebirth. Thus, the Osirion could have functioned as a ceremonial center for rituals of immortality and spiritual regeneration. The inscriptions within the Osirion are scarce and were added later, primarily by Seti I and other pharaohs who left royal cartouches on some walls. This reinforces the idea that the original structure could be much older than its dynastic reuse. In terms of age, some archaeologists argue that the Osirion might date back to the pre-dynastic period, over 5,000 years ago. More conservative scholars believe it was built contemporaneously with Seti, though they acknowledge its extremely archaic style. The debate remains open, and direct dating of the blocks has not been possible, since limestone and granite do not contain organic material for radiocarbon dating. The exact function of the Osirion also remains a mystery. Unlike other Egyptian temples, It lacks hypostyle halls with decorated columns or narrative reliefs explaining its purpose. It is a stark, powerful building centered around a water-filled pit, which today remains almost constantly submerged due to underground seepage. Some bolder theories suggest that the Osirion could even predate organized Egyptian civilization, built by an unknown people with advanced engineering knowledge. Although these ideas are not officially accepted, they reflect the fascination the site exerts on all who visit or study it. The Osirion has also been symbolically linked to the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. According to ancient texts, Abydos was considered a sacred gateway to Osiris's realm, and the submerged Osirion could have been a physical representation of that spiritual world. Today, access to the Osirion is limited. The persistent presence of water complicates excavation and detailed study. Visitors to Abydos can observe the structure from above, contemplating the immense blocks partially submerged in the still, green waters. From there, the Osirion impresses with its monumental sobriety. It is not a place of overt grandeur, but of silent strength, a monument that invites contemplation, prompting questions about who its builders were and what profound meaning its architecture holds. Beyond theories, the Osirion remains an impressive example of technical skill and spiritual vision, whether of the ancient Egyptians or perhaps an even earlier civilization. It stands as a reminder that amid the desert sands and beneath the weight of centuries, structures endure, guarding secrets waiting to be uncovered. A space submerged in history, still standing today, silently resisting the passage of time. The Ram Setu Bridge, the lost path between India and Sri Lanka, between the southern tip of India and the island of Sri Lanka, across the shallow waters of the Pak Strait, lies a formation that, seen from the air, appears too straight to be entirely natural. The Ram Setu Bridge, also known as Adam's Bridge. For centuries, sailors and explorers have noted the existence of this chain of sandbanks, islets, and reefs. At low tide, certain sections reveal parts of a submerged path that connects the two lands, as if, in ancient times, it was possible to walk from one continent to the other. Ram Setu is not just a geographic phenomenon. It is also a central element of one of India's oldest and most revered epics, the Ramayana. According to the Ramayana, Prince Rama, a divine incarnation, built a bridge with the help of an army of monkeys and mythical beings to rescue his wife Sita, who had been abducted by the demon Ravana and taken to the island of Lanka. The structure, known as Rama Setu, Rama's Bridge, was a tangible path between the human world and the realm of the supernatural. For centuries, this story was regarded as myth, a symbolic narrative rich in religious and spiritual meaning. However, the actual existence of the bridge, now visible in modern satellite photographs, has sparked a fascinating debate. Could it be that the Ramayana was based on a distant memory of a real bridge, now submerged beneath the waves? Geologists and historians have attempted to answer this question. Scientific studies suggest that the Ram Setu formation shows both natural characteristics and possible human modification. Research indicates that the seabed in this region is relatively young geologically, formed during the last ice age about 7,000 years ago. At that time, sea levels were significantly lower, and much of today's Pak Strait was dry land or only shallowly submerged. This suggests that, in ancient times, there was indeed a land or semi-submerged corridor between India and Sri Lanka. Dating of materials like coral fragments and sediments in the area suggests that parts of the bridge could be between 5,000 and 7,000 years old. However, the question of whether humans actively intervened in its construction remains open. Some archaeologists propose that ancient coastal communities may have reinforced natural crossings with stones, logs, and other materials to facilitate the passage of caravans, goods, or even armies. Others argue that the bridge is entirely natural, the result of sedimentation, ocean currents, and the accumulation of sand and coral. Whatever the truth may be, Ram Setu holds a special place in the collective imagination. Since ancient times, it has been revered as a symbol of faith, perseverance, and devotion. Even today, Hindu pilgrims visit the most accessible points of the bridge to pay homage to Rama and remember his epic story. In modern times, the bridge has also been the subject of political and environmental controversy. Projects to dredge the area and allow a direct maritime route between India and Sri Lanka sparked massive protests, both for religious reasons and environmental concerns. Ultimately, preservation of the site prevailed, largely due to its immense cultural and spiritual value. The Ram Setu Bridge not only connects two lands, it also connects the past and the present, history and legend. From the air, the view is breathtaking. A line of pale spots stretches across the turquoise waters, like a lost path in the middle of the ocean, a reminder that myths sometimes hold fragments of truth within them. Today, the bridge remains partly submerged, partly hidden, a whisper from ancient times resisting the passage of centuries. It doesn't matter whether it was built stone by stone or emerged naturally. Its existence continues to fascinate those who behold it, awakening questions about what we know, what we believe, and what we may never fully understand. A lost path among the waters, filled with history, myth, and mystery. The Klerksdorp Spheres, impossible objects from the remote past. Deep within the mines of South Africa, buried among layers of rock more than 2.8 billion years old, miners stumbled upon something they never expected. Small metallic spheres, perfectly formed, with concentric grooves that seemed deliberately crafted. These mysterious objects, now known as the Klerksdorp Spheres, are named after the nearby South African city where they were discovered. And ever since their find, they have sparked a debate that remains unresolved. Are they simply natural formations, or evidence that something far more complex existed on Earth much earlier than we thought possible? The spheres are small, most measuring between 2 and 10 centimeters in diameter. Some are made of solid metallic material, mainly hematite or pyrite, while others have a softer core, resembling a hardened clay-like mix. What draws the most attention is their shape, almost perfectly spherical, with bands or grooves regularly encircling them. The precision of these markings is such that, in some cases, they appear to have been made using modeling or machining techniques. For those encountering them for the first time, it's hard to believe that something so symmetrical could have arisen purely through natural processes. The age of the rocks containing these spheres has been firmly established through geological dating, around 2.8 billion years. At that time, according to mainstream science, life on Earth consisted only of simple microorganisms, with no civilizations or life forms capable of working materials. Against this backdrop, the Klerksdorp Spheres present an intriguing mystery. One of the first explanations proposed by conventional science is that the spheres are natural concretions, formed by the slow deposition of minerals around a central core over millions of years. Similar phenomena are observed in other geological settings, where mineral concentrations spontaneously create rounded shapes. The bands or grooves, according to this theory, would be the result of variations in the material's composition or differences in mineral deposition rates as the sphere formed. However, not everyone is satisfied with this explanation. Many independent researchers and mystery enthusiasts point out that the perfection of some spheres, along with the regularity of their markings, seems too precise to be attributed solely to the randomness of geological processes. Indeed, some spheres exhibit peculiar magnetic properties and a level of hardness that challenges the idea they were shaped only by time and pressure. The controversy grew in the 1980s, when the media began presenting the spheres as out-of-place artifacts or OP arts. These more adventurous interpretations suggest that the spheres might be evidence of prehistoric advanced civilizations, or even remnants of visitors from other worlds. While this view lacks official scientific support, it has helped keep the fascination around the spheres alive. Today, several of these spheres are displayed in local museums in South Africa, such as the Klerksdorp Museum, where visitors can observe their uniqueness up close. More cautious researchers continue to search for natural explanations. Some studies suggest that the formation of metallic spheres could result from very specific geological conditions, such as the presence of mineral-rich groundwater in ancient volcanic environments. This process, known as sulfide concretion, could create spheres with visible layers, similar to the bands seen on the Klerksdorp pieces. Even accepting this hypothesis, the spheres remain remarkable. Their degree of symmetry and their state of preservation after billions of years underground never fail to amaze. The mystery lies not only in their origin, but also in the feeling they provoke. The impression that, in the remote past, there were processes, natural or otherwise, that we barely begin to understand today. From time to time, new proposals emerge. Some suggest that the spheres could be residues of ancient meteorite impacts, with molten material forming spheres as it cooled in the air before settling on Earth. This hypothesis, while intriguing, has not been definitively proven for the Klerksdorp Spheres. For now, what we have are real, solid objects that emerged from the depths of time with an almost perfect form. In a world where multicellular life was barely beginning to evolve, these spheres already existed, trapped in the slow flow of geology, waiting to be discovered billions of years later. Today, visitors who see them can hold one of these spheres in their hands. Feel its weight, its cold, smooth surface, its regular markings. A simple yet powerful experience. No matter how many explanations are proposed, or how much science advances, the emotional impact of these small spheres remains undeniable. They are fragments of an unimaginably distant past. Reminders that the planet holds secrets that sometimes seem to brush the limits between nature and the impossible. And although we may never know their full story with certainty, the Klerksdorp Spheres will continue to spark that flash of wonder that fuels our curiosity. Simply there, round and silent, as witnesses to a world that existed long before us. The Red Deer Cave people, a lost lineage in Asia. In the remote mountains of Yunnan province, in southwest China, lies a place that long went unnoticed by the world of archaeology. The Red Deer Cave, a rocky refuge, seemingly simple at first glance, but one that ultimately revealed one of the most puzzling discoveries about humanity's origins in Asia. It was in 1989 when Chinese archaeologists found human remains in the cave. The bones, mixed with deer and other animal remains, were carefully recovered, although they remained stored for years without detailed analysis. It wasn't until the early 21st century that a group of researchers decided to study the remains in depth. What they found was astonishing. Skeletons that didn't fully match either modern humans or any known archaic humans. The fossils from Red Deer Cave exhibited a strange combination of features. On one hand, they had modern traits, rounder skulls and relatively small jaws. But on the other hand, they displayed primitive features, prominent brow ridges, thick bones, and broad faces. It was as if they belonged to a type of human that had evolved in parallel to Homo sapiens, retaining some ancestral traits far longer than previously thought. Analysis of the remains suggests these humans lived around 14,000 years ago, a time when it was believed that only fully modern Homo sapiens inhabited East Asia. This finding shifted previous assumptions. For a long time, it was believed that after Homo sapiens expanded out of Africa, other human species, such as Neanderthals or Denisovans, quickly disappeared or completely merged. But the Red Deer Cave discovery raised a new possibility, that a distinct population, perhaps descended from an early migratory group, survived in isolation until relatively recent times. Along with the bones, stone tools, and remains of local fauna were found in the cave. Everything pointed to a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, adapted to a mountainous, humid environment. Their diet seems to have been varied. They hunted deer, gathered fruits, roots, and small animals, demonstrating remarkable adaptability. The big question was, where did they fit in the human evolutionary tree? Were they an early branch of Homo sapiens, isolated for millennia? Or did they represent an unknown hybrid between Homo sapiens and some other archaic group like the Denisovans? Ancient DNA analysis, which could have clarified the matter, failed to recover sufficient genetic material due to the region's warm and humid climate, which accelerates DNA degradation. This left multiple possibilities open, but also deepened the mystery. Today, scientists refer to these individuals as the Red Deer Cave people, a provisional name reflecting their uniqueness. Their bones show that human evolution was much more complex than previously thought. It was not a straight line or a simple replacement of species. It was a mosaic of populations that coexisted, intermingled, disappeared, or survived in isolated areas far longer than we had imagined. The existence of the Red Deer Cave people also suggests that East Asia was a crucible of human diversity still poorly understood. While we know relatively well the interactions between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals in Europe, in Asia, the relationships between different human groups remain largely an open field of study. The implications of these discoveries are profound for understanding not only who we were but how we survived and adapted to changing environments. The inhabitants of Red Deer Cave lived during a major climatic transition at the end of the last ice age, a time when changes in the landscape, flora, and fauna forced human communities to adapt or perish. The fact that they managed to survive in such a mountainous environment speaks to a remarkable resilience. Today, the Red Deer Cave site is considered one of the key locations for studying human evolution in Asia. Excavations continue, although in a limited way due to the site's inaccessibility and natural conditions. The story of this small group of humans, with their blend of ancient and modern traits, remains open. Perhaps in the future, new DNA recovery techniques or findings in nearby caves will clarify their true place in our history. In the meantime, the image remains a forgotten community living in the mountains of Yunnan, hunting deer and gathering fruits, unaware that thousands of years later, their very existence would challenge our understanding of the past. A lineage lost in time, still keeping many secrets beneath the shadow of the rocks. The Cochno Stone, the enigma carved into the earth. On the outskirts of Clydebank, in Scotland, beneath a landscape that today seems ordinary, rests one of the most impressive and enigmatic testimonies of prehistoric art, the Cochno Stone. This immense sandstone slab, discovered in the late 19th century, has baffled archaeologists, historians, and curious minds for generations. It's not only its size, over 13 meters long and 8 meters wide, that surprises, but also the extent and complexity of the carvings covering its entire surface. The stone is decorated with a mantle of spirals, concentric circles, grooves, and strange geometric lines. These patterns, known as cup and ring marks, are common at several prehistoric sites across Europe, but never before had they been found in such concentration and scale. The Cochno Stone is not just an isolated artistic manifestation. It is a true tapestry of symbols whose exact meaning remains beyond our reach. Researchers have estimated that the carvings could be around 5,000 years old, placing their origin in the late Neolithic or early Bronze Age, a period when humanity was beginning to domesticate the land but still lived closely connected to the natural rhythms and mysteries of the sky. In this context, many experts suggest that the stone may have had a ceremonial or astronomical purpose. Some scholars have proposed that the patterns represent star maps, records of constellations, or important astronomical events. Others believe it could be a map of the surrounding landscape, a symbolic layout of rivers, hills, and sacred paths used in rituals and pilgrimages. A third interpretation suggests that the stone's art might have been a form of spiritual communication, a visual language coded to connect the human and the divine. What is clear is that executing the carvings required time, effort, and a deep knowledge of both the material and the patterns they wished to create. The technique used to create the grooves and cavities implies precise knowledge of how to work the stone without fracturing it, using basic stone or metal tools. The discovery of the stone was, at the time, a remarkable event. However, it soon faced its greatest enemy: exposure to the modern world. Vandalism, erosion, and lack of proper protection began to damage the carvings. Modern graffiti, trampling, and the harsh Scottish weather put the preservation of the stone at serious risk. To prevent further destruction, authorities decided in 1965 to cover it again with soil. For several decades, the Cochno Stone remained buried, as if its secrets were waiting for a better future to be revealed. The archaeological community never completely forgot it, but it wasn't until 2015 that a project led by the University of Glasgow managed to rediscover it. Using high-precision 3D scanning technology, the team was able to record the carvings in detail without leaving the stone exposed to environmental deterioration. The results of the scan confirmed that the Cochno Stone was not just large but also extremely complex. Patterns were identified that suggested not only aesthetic representations but also functional ones. Alignments, mathematical proportions, and symmetries that point to a sophisticated understanding of geometry and possibly astronomy. The overlapping of carvings revealed something more. The stone was not the work of a single generation. Multiple phases of work, additions, and modifications suggest that the stone was a site of continuous importance, revisited and reused over centuries. Each new layer of carvings may have represented new cultural interpretations, new ceremonies, or new spiritual needs. This accumulation of carvings opens the possibility that the Cochno Stone was, essentially, a living document for the prehistoric community, a collective record of knowledge, beliefs, and traditions transmitted not through written word but through symbols and forms. However, the true meaning of these symbols continues to elude modern understanding. Although the hypotheses are varied and plausible, none has been definitively proven. The stone, silent, seems to resist being confined to a single explanation. The Cochno Stone has been compared to other prehistoric manifestations like the Nazca Lines in Peru or the megaliths of Carnac in France. Examples of humanity's obsessive need to mark the landscape with symbolic language that, despite the passage of time, still resonates within us. Today, the stone remains buried again, guarded by the earth that once hid it. The decision to cover it reflects a desire to protect it for future generations until conditions allow for its preservation without damage. Digital reproductions and three-dimensional models now allow researchers and enthusiasts to explore its mysteries without risk. Through them, one can trace its grooves, follow its spirals, and contemplate the forms that, millennia ago, were carved with a purpose that escapes us but feels profoundly meaningful. The Cochno Stone is not just an archaeological monument. It is a silent testimony to the creativity, spirituality, and intelligence of our ancestors. A fragment of time frozen in stone, reminding us that there was a moment when humanity sought its place in the universe through forms and symbols, inscribing its dreams and fears onto the very skin of the earth. Every line, every spiral, is a voice reaching across millennia to speak to us of who we were. And in that whisper of stone, amid the modern noise, we can still hear the echo of a civilization that, with simple tools but an enormous spirit, wanted to leave its mark upon the world. The script of the Indus Valley, the lost language of a forgotten civilization. More than 4,000 years ago, in the fertile plains stretching across what we now know as Pakistan and northwestern India, one of the most advanced civilizations of antiquity flourished, the Indus Valley Civilization. Contemporary with the great empires of Mesopotamia and Egypt, the Indus Valley saw the rise of impressive cities like Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, and Dhalavira, urban centers featuring well-planned streets, advanced drainage systems, and carefully designed architecture. Among the most enigmatic remnants left behind by this civilization is a mystery that continues to challenge historians and archaeologists to this day: their writing. Scattered among dusty ruins, fragments of pottery, stone seals, tablets, and small figurines, brief inscriptions appear, meticulously engraved. These signs, generally aligned in horizontal sequences, display a series of stylized symbols, geometric figures, schematized animals, wavy lines, and shapes that at first glance seem to form a coherent writing system. The so-called Indus script is one of humanity's great lost languages. Despite decades of study and multiple attempts at decipherment, no one has yet been able to confidently read a single word written by those ancient inhabitants. The inscriptions are short. Most contain only a few symbols, rarely more than 20 in a single line. Sometimes they appear on functional objects like weights, tools, or pendants, but the majority of texts are found on polished stone seals, either square or rectangular, often accompanied by animal depictions: long-horned bulls, elephants, rhinoceroses, or fantastical creatures. These seals, rather than mere decorative objects, seem to have played an important role in commercial and administrative life. It is speculated they were used to mark goods, authenticate documents, or identify property, but the exact nature of their function has been lost along with the understanding of the signs. One of the greatest obstacles to deciphering the Indus script is the absence of bilingual texts. When the Rosetta Stone was discovered, with inscriptions in Greek and Egyptian hieroglyphs, it paved the way to unlocking the ancient symbols of the Nile. No such document has been found for the Indus Valley. There is currently no artifact that allows a direct comparison between its language and known languages. Nor has a long enough text been found to analyze complex grammatical or syntactic patterns. Most writings are brief, cryptic, like whispers from a long-extinct language. Another difficulty lies in the archaeological context. Unlike Egypt or Mesopotamia, where inscriptions abound in tombs, monuments, and temples, the Indus civilization seems to have had a different relationship with writing. There are no extensive religious texts, nor large stone inscriptions glorifying kings or gods. What remains are everyday fragments, scattered pieces that do not allow for a full reconstruction of their symbolic world. Various theories have been proposed to explain the nature of this script. Some researchers believe it was not an alphabetic writing system, like ours, nor a syllabic one. It could have been a set of logograms, where each symbol represents an entire word or idea, similar to early Chinese characters. Others suggest it might have been a proto-writing system, a set of auxiliary signs used to support the oral transmission of information without forming a full-fledged written language. The most intriguing possibility is that the Indus script was part of a ritualized communication system, used in specific contexts such as trade, social contracts, or religious ceremonies, and not necessarily designed to record long narratives or literature. Modern attempts to decipher the script have used everything from statistical methods to artificial intelligence. Frequency analyses suggest that the signs follow non-random patterns, indicating an organized internal system of rules. Some studies have even detected repetition patterns and combinations typical of structured linguistic systems. However, without a clear reference point, any interpretation remains speculative. Some hypotheses propose connections between the Indus signs and Dravidian languages, still spoken in southern India, but this idea has not been conclusively proven. Others suggest links to extinct languages of Iran or Central Asia, based on evidence of ancient trade contacts. Beyond the academic controversies, what is undeniable is that the Indus Valley civilization possessed a level of social, economic, and technological organization that rivaled its contemporaries in Egypt and Mesopotamia. Its cities, with urban drainage systems, public structures, warehouses, and communal baths, reflect a sophisticated degree of planning. All of this points to a society capable of administering large populations and resources, making it even more likely that they had a complex communication system. The collapse of the Indus civilization remains another enigma. It is estimated that by around 1900 before Christ, many of its cities were abandoned or declined abruptly. Factors such as climate change, river shifts, and internal tensions may have contributed to its fall. With its disappearance, the knowledge of their writing was also lost. Today, fragments of the Indus script are preserved in museums around the world. Seals, tablets, engraved beads, waiting for some future mind to reconstruct their meaning. Each small object, each tiny inscription, is a silent testimony to a culture that tamed nature, built monumental cities, and created symbols that, though mute, still transmit their presence. The Indus script remains one of the great unresolved mysteries of archaeology, a language trapped in stone and clay, waiting to be heard once again. Perhaps someday, when new discoveries emerge or new technologies allow us to penetrate its secret, the voice of the Indus Valley will speak once more. Until then, its signs remain a distant echo, a whisper from a world lost in the sands of time. The ruins of Arkaim, the enigma of the circular city. Across the vast steppes of the southern Urals, where open fields stretch endlessly to the horizon, lie the silent ruins of a settlement that remained hidden beneath the earth for millennia. Its discovery in 1987 was accidental, when a project to build a reservoir unearthed one of the most intriguing prehistoric cities ever found, Arkaim. At first glance, what emerged from the ground seemed like a strange formation of concentric rings. But as archaeologists began to excavate and study the structure, they realized they were facing the remains of a city planned with astonishing precision. Arkaim was built around the 17th century before Christ, during the Bronze Age. Yet its architectural and urban complexity far exceeds what one would expect from a society of that time. The city features a structure of two main rings, with perfectly aligned streets, houses organized around a central space, and drainage systems designed to withstand torrential rains. Each house was connected to an underground network of channels that evacuated rainwater and waste, suggesting not only advanced hydraulic engineering knowledge but also a strong sense of community life. Every construction seems to have followed strict design standards, respecting a geometric order that left no room for improvisation. The circular design of Arkaim is no accident. The orientation of the streets and the entrances of the houses show precise astronomical alignments. Many researchers believe that the city may have functioned as a large astronomical observatory, allowing its inhabitants to track the movements of the sun, the moon, and the stars for agricultural, ceremonial, or spiritual purposes. Arkaim's layout allows for the observation of the summer and winter solstices with remarkable accuracy. Possible alignments with secondary astronomical events, such as equinoxes and lunar cycles, have also been identified. All of this suggests that the builders of the city possessed refined astronomical knowledge, comparable to that of more widely known cultures like the ancient Egyptians or the Mayans. Judging by the remains found, Arkaim's inhabitants were skilled craftsmen, farmers, and warriors. Fragments of pottery, bronze tools, personal ornaments, and textile remnants have been uncovered. Evidence of smelting furnaces indicates that they systematically worked with metal, producing weapons, utensils, and ornaments with notable skill. The location of the city also seems to have been carefully chosen. Situated on a slight elevation, protected by nearby rivers and surrounded by fertile plains, Arkaim offered both defensive and agricultural advantages. The outer wall, built with compacted earth and wood, reinforced the city's defense against potential invaders. Life in Arkaim, however, was not eternal. By the 16th century before Christ, the city was abandoned. The exact reasons remain a topic of debate. Some researchers suggest that climate changes, resource depletion, or internal conflicts may have led to its decline. Others consider the possibility of migratory movements or natural disasters. Arkaim's abandonment was not chaotic. The remains show that the inhabitants systematically dismantled some of the structures before leaving, as if they wanted to take part of their legacy with them or prevent it from falling into enemy hands. For centuries, Arkaim remained hidden beneath the dust of the steppes. It was only in recent decades that its historical and cultural importance began to be recognized. Today, many consider Arkaim one of the earliest centers of Indo-European civilization. Its age and characteristics link it to the Sintashta culture, an ancestral group that, according to some theories, played a crucial role in the spread of Indo-European languages across Eurasia. The circular structure of the city has also inspired more symbolic interpretations. Some see in its design a representation of the cosmos, a materialized image of universal order. Others associate Arkaim with later legends about lost civilizations, mythical realms that could have been cradles of forgotten knowledge. In Russian popular imagination, Arkaim has acquired an almost mystical aura. It is seen as a place of power, a kind of Russian Stonehenge, where telluric and celestial energies intertwine. Many visitors come to the site each year, not only for its historical value but also seeking spiritual experiences or a connection to a remote past. From a scientific perspective, Arkaim's value is undeniable. Its remains provide crucial information about the social, technological, and cultural dynamics of the first urban societies in the southern Urals. Each shard of pottery, each bronze tool, each unearthed structure helps to reconstruct a time when humans, organized in complex communities, were already shaping their environment with clear vision and profound knowledge. The conservation of Arkaim is now a priority. Protected as an archaeological reserve, the site continues to be the subject of excavations and studies. New technologies, such as laser scanning and aerial photography, allow its structures to be mapped with millimetric precision, revealing details that until recently remained hidden. Each research season brings new data, details about daily life, construction techniques, and the spiritual beliefs of its inhabitants. Little by little, the veil covering Arkaim's past is lifting, showing a more complete image of a civilization that, though forgotten for centuries, left an indelible mark on human history. Arkaim is a silent reminder that civilization, science, and spirituality have walked together since time immemorial. That even in the most unexpected corners of the planet, the ancients sought to understand the universe and their place within it, building cities that were simultaneously homes, centers of knowledge, and reflections of their worldview. There, in the wind-swept steppes, among the remains of circular walls and streets aligned with the stars, Arkaim continues to tell its story. A story of ingenuity, faith, and community. A story that, despite the passing centuries, remains alive under the vast sky of Eurasia. The Dropa Stones, messages in the silence of the mountains. In the remote Bayan Har Mountains, on the border between China and Tibet, lies a mystery that has fascinated researchers, adventurers, and dreamers for decades. The Dropa Stones. A series of stone discs that, it is claimed, hold a forgotten message written in a language that no modern civilization has been able to comprehend. The story begins in 1938, when an archaeological expedition led by Professor Chi Pu-Ti was exploring caves in this inhospitable region. There, among rocky passages and natural chambers, the researchers found a series of ancient tombs, marked not by traditional headstones, but by singular objects. Stone discs, approximately 30 centimeters in diameter, with a hole in the center and finely carved lines spiraling outward from the center to the edge. At first glance, the discs appeared ancient, weathered by time. But upon closer examination, it became evident that the lines were not natural markings. They seemed to be some kind of inscription, a writing so minuscule that it was only visible under significant magnification. In total, according to initial reports, over 700 discs were discovered in the caves, each one a silent testimony of a lost culture. The difficulty of interpreting the discs was immediate. No one recognized the language in which they were written, and there was no reference framework to help understand their meaning. For a time, the objects were ignored, relegated to museum storerooms. It was decades later, in the 1960s, when Dr. Tsumam Nui, a supposed linguist from the Beijing Academy of Sciences, claimed to have deciphered part of the disc's content. According to his interpretation, the engravings told the story of a group of beings who had arrived from outer space, crashing into the remote Tibetan mountains. These visitors, known as the Dropa, had been rejected by local tribes, unable to return to their world, and forced to survive in a hostile environment. If confirmed, the story would be revolutionary. But the account of Tsumam Nui is itself as nebulous as the contents of the discs. There are no solid records of his existence in official Chinese archives, and much of what is known about his supposed work comes from indirect reports and later publications in the West. This lack of verification has led many scholars to regard the Dropa Stones as a modern myth, a legend born from a mixture of real discoveries, free interpretations, and fascination with extraterrestrial mysteries. However, not everything can be dismissed so easily. Some independent researchers claim that similar stones exist in Chinese museums and that their origin still lacks a clear explanation. Even in more recent geological studies, it has been confirmed that certain discs found in the region present unusual mineral compositions, including high concentrations of cobalt and other elements that make precise dating difficult. Moreover, in the mountains where they were supposedly found, live minority tribes who exhibit unusual physical traits. Very short stature, slightly different head shapes compared to the average population, characteristics that some enthusiasts associate with the legend of the Dropa. Could these peoples be descendants of an unknown ancestral migration? Or are they simply another expression of human genetic diversity adapted to extreme conditions? What is undeniable is that the story of the Dropa Stones touches something deep within our imagination. The idea of travelers from other worlds, trapped on Earth thousands of years ago, trying to leave a record of their tragedy in humble stones, carries a symbolic power that transcends its historical veracity. Even if we set aside the extraterrestrial interpretation, the stones themselves remain a challenge. Their design, their spiral engraving pattern, the apparent intention to transmit a message, all suggest they were created by a culture with an advanced level of organization and symbolism. In the absence of conclusive proof, the Dropa Stones remain in that peculiar limbo where archaeology and mythology meet, a territory where verified facts and whispered tales intertwine, shaping a mystery that, beyond its real origin, continues to invite reflection. Over time, academic interest in the Dropa Stones has diminished, but in popular culture their echo persists. Documentaries, books, and articles in multiple languages have kept their legend alive, reminding us that in the forgotten corners of the world, there is always room for the unexplained. Today, those who venture into the Bayan Har Mountains may find little more than desolate landscapes, moss-covered stones, and the whisper of the wind among rocky passes. But for those who know the story of the Dropa Stones, the place holds a special aura, a reminder that sometimes the oldest answers are inscribed in the most unexpected places. Whether the stones are relics of a forgotten human civilization or the vestiges of an improbable encounter, their mystery remains intact. A silence spanning centuries that, like the lines etched into their surfaces, invites us to keep exploring, to keep questioning, to keep dreaming. Because in every unresolved mystery, in every engraved stone without explanation, resonates the eternal voice of human curiosity, that spark that never stops seeking. The elongated skulls of Paracas, the legacy of an ancient people. On the Paracas Peninsula, in southern Peru, the dry winds and desert sands have guarded one of South America's most puzzling archaeological discoveries for centuries. The elongated skulls of Paracas. Discovered in the early 20th century by Peruvian archaeologist Julio C. Teo, these skeletal remains belong to an ancient civilization that thrived in the region around 2,000 years ago. What makes them unique is not just their age, but the distinctive shape of the skulls, markedly different from what we typically expect to see in human remains. These skulls show an unusual elongation, with the back of the head extending backward dramatically. This is not the result of an accident or a natural anomaly, but a deliberate modification, practiced from infancy using specific cranial shaping techniques. The procedure was relatively simple, though prolonged. It involved applying constant pressure to a child's head using boards, bandages, or special apparatus. Over the years, while the bones were still malleable, they could be shaped into the characteristic elongated form. Cranial deformation was not unique to the people of Paracas. It has been recorded in various ancient cultures, from the Maya in Mesoamerica to tribes in Africa and Asia. However, the Paracas skulls stand out for the extreme degree of elongation and the perfection of their modeling. Some specimens show an elongation that doubles the normal size of a human skull, while maintaining balanced proportions and bone structures adapted to the new shape. This has led to multiple interpretations regarding its meaning. It is believed that elongated skulls were a symbol of status. Not all individuals exhibited this modification, suggesting it was a practice reserved for certain elites or privileged castes, a physical trait that served as a social identifier, marking leaders or priests from a distance. It is also possible that cranial deformation was linked to religious beliefs. Perhaps it represented an attempt to approach aesthetic or spiritual ideals associated with superior or divine beings. In some ancient cultures, an elongated head was a symbol of wisdom, spiritual connection, or proximity to the gods. Though in the case of Paracas, the specific details of their religion and worldview remain largely unknown. The discovery of these skulls has also sparked bolder speculations. Some non-mainstream researchers have suggested that the unusual morphology of the skulls could point to a non-human origin or external influence. Theories of contact with unknown civilizations, beings from other worlds, or lost lineages have circulated, fueled by the difficulty of finding exact parallels. However, formal scientific studies have determined that the Paracas skulls are human, intentionally modified through shaping techniques from infancy. Genetic analyses conducted in recent years have confirmed their belonging to Amerindian lineages, although certain genetic variants are still under investigation. Beyond the theories, the Paracas skulls offer a fascinating testimony to past cultural practices. They demonstrate how far human societies have been willing to go to modify their own bodies to express belonging, identity, or spiritual connection. The Paracas civilization left traces beyond their people. They also bequeathed us textiles of impressive quality, carefully preserved mummies, and complex irrigation systems, speaking of an organized society capable of thriving in an arid environment. The Paracas mantles, made from alpaca fibers and cotton, dyed in bright colors, are considered one of the most sophisticated textile expressions of the ancient world. These fabrics, like the skulls, reveal a deep sense of artistry, symbolism, and attention to detail. The Paracas necropolis, where many of the elongated skulls were found, shows complex funerary practices. The bodies were wrapped in ceremonial mantles, placed in a fetal position, and buried in communal underground tombs, accompanied by offerings and everyday objects. This treatment of the dead suggests a profound belief in the afterlife and the need to prepare the deceased for their journey beyond. Although much knowledge about the Paracas culture has been lost, fragments like the elongated skulls allow us to glimpse a complex civilization, deeply aware of its identity and proud of its traditions. Today, many of these skulls are preserved in museums in Peru and around the world. Their image strikes both for its rarity and for the skill involved in their creation. They are tangible proof that even in the most ancient times, humanity sought ways to transcend biological limits, to alter appearance as an expression of something beyond immediate need. Identity, faith, status, or a desire to belong to something greater. The legacy of the Paracas elongated skulls lives on in archaeology and in popular imagination. An echo of ancestral practices that, though they may seem strange today, reflect the universal human impulse to shape our world, our bodies, and our meaning. In the quiet museums where they are displayed, behind glass cases, the Paracas skulls observe us from their timeless stillness, a distant gaze connecting our present with a remote past, full of mysteries yet to be uncovered. The Jiroft Culture, the awakening of a forgotten civilization. In southeastern Iran, where vast plains blend into arid mountains, lies one of the most important archaeological discoveries of recent decades, the Jiroft Culture, a civilization that, for centuries, remained hidden beneath the desert dust and has only recently begun to reveal its richness to the world. It all began in the early 21st century, when heavy rains caused the Halil River to flood. The water, washing away the soil, uncovered thousands of stone, ceramic, and bronze artifacts that local inhabitants began collecting. The massive discovery quickly attracted the attention of authorities and archaeologists. The organized excavations that followed revealed that this was no ordinary settlement. What emerged from the earth was the echo of an ancient civilization that existed approximately between 2700 and 2200 before Christ. A society whose level of development rivaled the great contemporary cultures of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley. The main city, located near modern-day Jiroft, showed evidence of advanced urban planning. Remains of monumental structures, adobe walls, irrigation canals, and complex hydraulic management systems were found. Everything indicates that Jiroft was an important commercial and cultural center, connected to trade routes stretching across Asia. One of the most surprising aspects of Jiroft is the artistic quality of the objects discovered. Among the finds are finely carved chlorite vessels, featuring designs that depict human figures, fantastic animals, and ritual scenes. The precision of the carvings, the level of detail in the motifs, and the variety of themes reveal a highly developed artistic tradition. Many of these representations are unique. Some pieces display hybrid creatures, half human and half animal, possibly reflecting religious or mythological beliefs specific to the region. Other motifs include intertwined serpents, majestic birds, and complex ceremonial scenes. Jiroft's iconography does not fully match that of other known civilizations, although it shows stylistic ties to Mesopotamian cultures. This has led some specialists to propose that Jiroft may have been a cultural bridge, a contact point where influences from different ancient worlds converged. Beyond its art, another element suggesting a high level of sophistication is the use of writing. On several tablets found at the site, signs have been identified that may correspond to an independent writing system, distinct from Mesopotamian cuneiform. Although it has not yet been fully deciphered, the mere existence of its own system of signs suggests that the Jiroft culture achieved a considerable intellectual level. They were not merely builders and traders. They were also capable of recording information, ideas, or rituals through symbolic forms. Archaeological evidence indicates that Jiroft maintained long-distance trade relations. Exotic products have been found, such as lapis lazuli from Afghanistan and copper objects demonstrating advanced metallurgy. This confirms that Jiroft was not an isolated community, but a dynamic player within a vast ancient Asian trade network. Regarding its end, the history of Jiroft remains unclear. It is believed that natural disasters, such as floods or river course changes, may have caused the city's decline. Over time, the desert swallowed its structures, and its memory faded from historical records. It was not until the modern rediscovery that its legacy began to be reconstructed. Today, archaeologists continue excavating the site, uncovering fragments of a culture that, despite its past greatness, had been completely omitted from traditional accounts of antiquity. Jiroft's importance lies not only in its material wealth or antiquity. Its discovery forces a rewriting of part of Near Eastern history, showing that great civilizations did not develop exclusively along the great river valleys like the Nile, the Euphrates, or the Indus. Other urban centers, other complex cultures, flourished alongside them, leaving their own imprint on human evolution. Artifacts from Jiroft, now housed in museums and laboratories, continue to be studied using new technologies. Chemical analyses, advanced dating methods, and digital reconstruction techniques allow a better understanding of their way of life, beliefs, and achievements. Yet much remains to be discovered. Large areas of the site remain unexplored. It is estimated that beneath the layers of soil and stone may lie temples, palaces, and ceremonial spaces that will offer more clues about the social and spiritual organization of this ancient people. The Jiroft culture once again demonstrates that human history is far broader, more diverse, and more complex than often imagined. That beneath deserts, mountains, and valleys around the world, entire chapters of our own memory remain hidden. And although many questions about their language, religion, and connections to other peoples remain unanswered, the mere fact of recovering their existence already expands our understanding of the past. Thus, in the dry lands of Iran, beneath the persistent sun and sands, the city of Jiroft continues to reveal its story piece by piece, fragment by fragment. A voice that, after being silent for millennia, is slowly being heard once again. The Tartaria Tablets, the echo of the first writing. In the heart of Eastern Europe, in present-day Romania, lies one of the most intriguing discoveries of modern archaeology, the Tartaria Tablets. A find that, though modest in size, raises profound questions about the origins of human writing. It was in 1961 when archaeologist Nikolai Vlasa, while excavating a Neolithic site in the village of Tartaria, unearthed 3 small pieces of fired clay. 2 of them were rectangular plaques. The third was circular. What made them special was not just their antiquity, but the symbols engraved on their surfaces. The tablets displayed signs and schematic figures organized in orderly rows, as if following a reading pattern. Dating of organic remains found in the same archaeological layer placed the tablets around 5000 before Christ, making them some of the oldest inscribed artifacts known to humanity. The initial impression was one of astonishment. The Tartaria symbols did not seem to be simple decorations. They were systematic, repetitive in some cases, and clearly intentional. Some archaeologists immediately proposed the idea that this was a form of proto-writing, predating even the Sumerian inscriptions traditionally regarded as the beginning of written history. Others, more cautious, suggested that the tablets might simply be ritual objects, perhaps used in religious ceremonies, without actual linguistic content. The discussion soon widened. The signs found at Tartaria bore similarities to symbols discovered elsewhere in the Danube region, at Neolithic settlements of the Vinca culture, which flourished at the same time in the Balkans. These parallels opened a fascinating possibility that an early organized symbolic system might have developed independently in Europe, alongside Mesopotamia and Egypt. The idea of early writing in Europe challenged traditional narratives. For decades, the dominant view had been that civilization, and, by extension, writing emerged in the Fertile Crescent and spread outward. Tartaria suggested something different, that in other corners of the world, small centers of civilization may have independently developed their own ways of recording information much earlier than previously thought. The signs on the tablets are varied. Crosses, wavy lines, circles, letter-like forms, and figures resembling fish or plants. Some seem to represent concrete objects. Others are more abstract. Yet their organized arrangement suggests a communicative intent beyond mere decoration. Despite the studies conducted, the content of the tablets remains a mystery. Without a broader context, such as a series of similar texts or a known reference language, it is nearly impossible to translate the symbols. Theories propose that the tablets could record commercial transactions, lists of religious offerings, or even ritual narratives. None of these interpretations has been definitively proven. Another intriguing aspect of the find is that the tablets were fired. In most Neolithic cultures, engraved clay was simply sun-dried. Firing the clay required extra effort, indicating a desire for long-term preservation. This suggests that the objects were not casual artifacts. They were important to those who created them. The archaeological context where the tablets were found also provides clues. Alongside them, archaeologists discovered human bones, fine pottery, and anthropomorphic figurines, indicating the site had ceremonial or funerary significance. It is possible that the tablets were part of a ritual, perhaps intended to accompany the deceased on their journey to the afterlife, or to record a sacred act. In recent years, research into Neolithic European cultures has revealed that these societies were much more complex than previously thought. Far from being primitive farming groups, they developed trade networks, hierarchical social systems, and sophisticated artistic expressions. The Vinca culture, linked to the Tartaria Tablets, shows evidence of early urbanism, metallurgy, and symbolic art of high sophistication. Although we cannot say with certainty that the tablets represent a full writing system, they do reflect a level of abstraction and systematization close to the earliest forms of written communication. The Tartaria discovery is not isolated. Other objects with similar symbols have been found in Serbia, Bulgaria, and northern Greece, reinforcing the idea that there was a widespread symbolic tradition in southeastern Europe during the Neolithic. Today, the Tartaria tablets are preserved at the National Museum of Transylvania in Cluj-Napoca. There, in modest display cases, they continue to astonish visitors, reminding us that there are still chapters of human history we have only just begun to uncover. Their humble appearance, far from grand stone monuments or majestic temples, carries a powerful message. Civilization did not arise from a single center, but rather sprouted in different places, driven by the same human need to understand, record, and transmit. And even if we cannot yet read the Tartaria tablets, their very existence speaks of a humanity that, even 7,000 years ago, was already striving to leave lasting marks on the world. The Plain of Jars, the silent mystery of Laos. In the heart of Laos, hidden among green hills and dusty trails, stretches one of Asia's most mysterious landscapes, the Plain of Jars, a scenery dotted with thousands of massive stone containers that, for centuries, has sparked the curiosity and imagination of all who behold it. The Plain of Jars covers a vast area, mainly in the province of Xiangkuang. There, scattered across dozens of archaeological sites, lie over 2,000 stone jars, some isolated, others forming groupings that, seen from a distance, resemble the remnants of some long-lost civilization. These jars vary in size and shape. Some barely reach a meter in height, while others exceed 3 meters and weigh several tons. They are carved from different types of rock, including sandstone, granite, and limestone, crafted with a skill that suggests remarkable technical ability. The modern discovery of the Plain of Jars dates back to the 19th century, when French explorers encountered them during colonial expeditions. Since then, archaeologists from around the world have tried to understand their purpose and origin, but to this day, no definitive answer exists. The most widely accepted theory holds that the jars were used in ancient funerary rituals. It is believed that the bodies of the deceased were placed inside the jars for a secondary decomposition process before being cremated or formally buried. This practice, known as secondary burial, has been documented in other ancient Southeast Asian cultures. In this context, the jars would have served as temporary urns, symbols of transition between life and death. Excavations in recent decades have supported this hypothesis. Human remains, fragments of pottery, stone beads, and bronze tools have been found near several jars, indicating that these were not mere deposits of objects, but sacred ritual spaces. However, not all mysteries have been solved. The exact age of the jars remains a subject of debate. Some studies date them between 500 before Christ and 500 CE, while others suggest they could be even older. The lack of specific inscriptions or decorations on most jars complicates the task of dating them precisely. natural erosion has also erased many possible clues. Another major mystery is how the stones were transported to their current locations. Although some jars were carved directly at nearby quarries, others appear to have been moved several kilometers across rugged, mountainous terrain. Moving stones of that size would have required the coordinated effort of dozens, perhaps hundreds of people, using transportation techniques that would still be considered complex today. It is also curious that some jars have stone lids, while others do not. This could indicate differences in the status of the individuals for whom the urns were made, or variations in funeral rituals over time. Local oral traditions offer various legends to explain the origin of the jars. One of the most well-known tells of an ancient kingdom and a powerful king named Kunchung. According to legend, after a great military victory, the king ordered the carving of the enormous jars to store colossal amounts of rice wine for the celebration. Another popular story claims the jars were created by giants, mythical beings who once inhabited the region. Although far from historical accuracy, these legends reflect the deep impression the jars have left on the collective imagination for generations. During the 20th century, the plain of jars suffered severely from the effects of war. During the Vietnam conflict, especially during the secret war in Laos, the region was heavily bombed. Today, many areas of the plain remain contaminated with unexploded ordnance, making archaeological research and tourism dangerous in several zones. In recent years, significant efforts have been made to clear the most important sites and make them accessible to the public. The main site, known as Site 1, is the safest and most thoroughly studied so far. There, among tall grass fields, visitors can walk well-marked paths and closely observe dozens of these enigmatic jars, many still standing stoically against the passage of time. UNESCO officially recognized the Plain of Jars as a World Heritage Site in 2019, acknowledging its cultural and archaeological significance. This recognition has spurred new studies, using technologies like laser scanning and geoarchaeological analysis to better understand the context in which the jars were constructed and used. Each jar, with its simple yet imposing form, seems to hold its own story, stories of ancient beliefs, of communities that honored their dead in ways we can barely imagine today. Beyond modern interpretations, the Plain of Jars continues to transmit a sense of mystery, a stone silence that dominates the landscape, inviting visitors to walk its paths with respect and awe. There are no grand temples or detailed sculptures, only stones and time, immobile under the tropical sun or shrouded in the mist of humid mornings. The Plain of Jars reminds us that humanity, since ancient times, has sought ways to give meaning to life and death. And although the details are lost to the centuries, the essence of that search remains etched into the landscape. Today, those who visit the plain find more than just an archaeological site. They find a silent link to the past, a simple and direct connection to those who, thousands of years ago, shaped stone to leave their mark on the world. The Carnac Stones, the silent legacy of the ancient builders. In the region of Brittany, in the northwest of France, stretches one of the most impressive and enigmatic megalithic complexes in all of Europe, the Carnac Stones. Thousands of menhirs, aligned with surprising precision, are spread across kilometers of open fields, creating a landscape that seems to come from another time. The Carnac site contains more than 3,000 stones, some of which reach up to 4 meters in height. They are arranged in alignments, dolmens, tumuli, and stone circles, transforming the terrain into a kind of gigantic stone map. Each granite block, extracted from nearby quarries, was erected with effort and care, forming patterns that still challenge archaeologists to decipher their purpose. The age of the Carnac stones is astonishing. They are estimated to have been erected between the years 4,500 and 3,300 before Christ, during the Neolithic period, making them older than more famous monuments such as Stonehenge or the Egyptian pyramids. The modern discovery of Carnac did not happen all at once. For centuries, the inhabitants of Brittany lived alongside these stones, sometimes considering them simple remnants of forgotten times, other times surrounding them with legends and superstitions. It was not until the 19th century that archaeologists and scholars began to study the site systematically. Since then, many theories about its function have been proposed. One of the most widespread hypotheses is that the Carnac alignments might have served as astronomical calendars. The stones, arranged in seemingly endless rows, could have marked solstices, equinoxes, or important lunar cycles for agriculture and ritual activities. Other researchers propose that the stones formed part of ceremonial routes, sacred paths that guided communities in processions or rituals related to fertility, life, and death. There is also the possibility that Carnac was a funerary center. The presence of burial mounds and funerary chambers nearby suggests that ancestor worship might have played a fundamental role in the construction of this immense complex. Despite numerous studies, there is still no clear consensus. The original meaning of the Carnac stones remains a mystery, hidden behind thousands of years of wind, rain, and cultural change. What is beyond doubt is the magnitude of the effort involved in their construction. Transporting and erecting multi-ton granite blocks would have required advanced social organization, practical engineering knowledge, and a clear purpose that justified such collective labor. The distribution of the stones follows geometric patterns that, at first glance, might seem chaotic, but reveal precise alignments when studied in detail. Some alignments, such as those at Menek, Kermerio, and Kurliskan, stretch for several kilometers in almost perfect lines. These stone corridors seem to vibrate across the landscape, as if marking invisible paths toward places of power or knowledge. Popular tradition has also tried to explain the origin of the stones. Among the best-known Breton legends is the story that the Carnac stones were actually Roman soldiers turned to stone by a druid. Another tale suggests that they were placed by giants who once inhabited the region. Although these legends lack historical basis, they reflect the emotional impact the stones have had over generations. In more recent times, the plain of Carnac has faced other challenges. Urbanization, modern agriculture, and tourism have affected many parts of the site. For this reason, much of Carnac has been declared a protected area, and today visitors must follow specific paths to minimize their impact on the terrain. Efforts have also been made to preserve the stones from further erosion. Archaeological research continues as well, using new technologies such as laser scanning, magnetic surveying, and subsurface analysis. These methods have revealed buried structures, pits, and alignments invisible to the naked eye, expanding our understanding of Carnac's scale and complexity. Walking among the stones, visitors perceive a peculiar sensation. The silence, the wind blowing between the menhirs, the regularity of the alignments, all contribute to creating a unique atmosphere. There are no grand temples or visible inscriptions, only upright stones, marking the passage of time and resisting the elements with a patience far beyond our brief human lifespans. Today, Carnac is not just an archaeological site. It is also a symbol of endurance, of humanity's capacity to dream big and imprint those dreams upon the landscape. Thousands of years after the last builders placed the final stone, the alignments of Carnac still stand, discreet yet imposing, a silent reminder that ancient civilizations, though different from ours, shared the same need to leave a lasting testimony of their passage through the world. And even though we do not know exactly what those ancient builders thought or felt, every stone raised under the Breton sky speaks of effort, community, and a vision that still resonates with us today. The Figurines of Al Ubaid, figures from a forgotten world. In the sands of southern Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers shape one of the most fertile valleys of the ancient world, lies a culture that, although less famous than its successors, left behind a mysterious legacy, the Al Ubaid culture. And among its most enigmatic remains stand out a series of small figures that seem to come from another world. The Al Ubaid figurines. The Al Ubaid culture flourished between the years 6500 and 3800 before Christ, long before Sumer consolidated as the first true civilization. It was a people of farmers, fishermen, and traders who began to establish organized villages and urban centers, laying the foundations for what would centuries later be known as Mesopotamia. The discovery of the figurines occurred in the early 20th century, during excavations at Tel Al Ubaid and other nearby sites such as Uar and Eridu. Amid layers of earth and the remains of ancient structures, archaeologists found small figures made of clay and stone, measuring between 10 and 20 centimeters in height. At first glance, The Al Ubaid figurines catch the eye for their anthropomorphic shapes, but with features that depart significantly from common human appearance. Their bodies are thin and stylized, but the most notable characteristic is their heads. Elongated, with large slanted eyes, fine noses, and sometimes skin with a scaly or textured appearance. Some figures hold objects in their hands. Others seem to represent ceremonial poses or gestures of authority. Some wear helmets or elaborate headdresses, while others display jewelry around the neck and wrists, indicating a certain importance in their dress and appearance. The peculiar look of the figurines has led to multiple interpretations. The most widely accepted view among official archaeology is that they represent deities or religious figures of the Ubaid culture. The figures, with their strange features, might have been attempts to depict divinities associated with fertility, nature, or supernatural forces. The presence of pregnant female figures suggests a possible association with fertility cults or motherhood, practices common in many Neolithic societies. Others, however, have proposed more controversial theories. The reptilian appearance of the figurines has fueled speculation about contacts with beings from other worlds, beings who might have been venerated or remembered by the ancient peoples of Mesopotamia. Although these hypotheses lack solid scientific support, they form part of the popular fascination with the figurines, reminding us that mystery has always accompanied discoveries from the past. Beyond alternative theories, what is certain is that the Al Ubaid figurines represent an advanced cultural development. They reflect a society capable of creating symbols, representing abstract concepts, and establishing complex belief systems. The Ubaid culture also demonstrated remarkable achievements in other areas. They built houses of mud bricks, organized large-scale agricultural production, and established trade networks that connected different regions of southern Mesopotamia. In their urban centers, such as Eridu, considered one of the first cities in human history, there were already temples and administrative structures that anticipated the monumental achievements of Sumer. Thus, the figurines are not merely artistic creations. They are witnesses to a moment of transition in human history, when small villages were evolving into the first urban civilizations. The context in which they were found also suggests ritual use. Many of the figures were discovered in temples, shrines, or buried alongside offerings. This reinforces the idea that they were part of religious ceremonies, perhaps as representations of deities or symbols of spiritual power. Not all figurines are identical. There are variations in features, postures, and ornaments, which could indicate different symbolic functions or the representation of various entities. So far, no text or inscription has been found that directly explains their meaning. Thus, interpretation remains open, based on cultural comparisons, symbolic analysis, and archaeological context. The Al Ubaid culture was eventually absorbed into the later developments of Mesopotamia. Many of its technological, religious, and social advancements were inherited by the Sumerians, who would bring Mesopotamian civilization to its peak. Today, the Al Ubaid figurines are preserved in museums in Iraq and in private collections around the world. Despite their small size, they continue to capture the imagination of researchers and the curious alike. Their strange forms, their deep eyes, and their meticulous details are reminders of a time when human beings were beginning to give physical form to their beliefs, fears, and aspirations. In the history of humanity, many objects bring us closer to our past. But few, like the Al Ubaid figurines, confront us so directly with the possibility of different realities, beliefs that went beyond the visible and delved into the symbolic. Today, more than 5,000 years after their creation, those small figures still stand, silent, observing us from their museum displays, offering fragments of a world that, although vanished, still resonates in every detail carved into the clay. The Sajama Lines, the invisible paths of the Altiplano. Across the vast and silent plains of the Bolivian Altiplano, where the horizon seems to merge with the sky, lies a mystery almost invisible to the untrained eye. The Sajama Lines, a network of straight paths, stretching for hundreds of kilometers, forming a web that only reveals its full magnitude when seen from above. The Sajama Lines were known to the local inhabitants since time immemorial, but it was not until the 20th century, with the advent of aviation and aerial photography, that the outside world began to grasp their scale. Unlike the famous Nazca lines in Peru, the Sajama lines do not form images of animals or intricate geometric designs. They are straight trajectories, seemingly endless, crossing mountains, valleys, and rugged terrain without deviating. These lines, some of which extend for several kilometers, were created by removing the surface layer of the soil, exposing the lighter ground beneath. Despite the passage of centuries, the lack of vegetation and minimal human alteration have preserved the paths, leaving them clearly visible. The origin of the lines remains a subject of debate. Archaeologists agree that they were created by the indigenous cultures that inhabited the Altiplano long before the arrival of European conquerors. However, the reasons behind their construction are still not entirely clear. One of the most widely accepted theories holds that the Sajama lines were ceremonial paths, sacred routes used for pilgrimages, processions, or religious rituals, connecting places of spiritual importance such as shrines, burial sites, or sacred water sources. In the Andean worldview, the natural landscape was deeply integrated into religious beliefs. Mountains, rivers, and lakes were not mere geographical features, but living entities, protective or capricious, that influenced daily life. Creating paths to connect these sacred points would have been a way to honor them and to establish symbolic routes of communication with spiritual forces. The precision of the lines is another striking aspect. Despite the absence of modern measuring tools, the builders managed to trace almost perfect straight lines, navigating all kinds of natural obstacles without losing direction. Modern technology has allowed the Sajama lines to be studied in greater detail. Aerial photography, satellite imagery, and geographic information systems have revealed the existence of thousands of kilometers of lines, forming an impressive network. In some cases, the lines converge at small groups of mounds, ruins, or archaeological sites yet to be fully explored. These points of convergence reinforce the idea that the lines served ceremonial purposes, marking pilgrimage routes between scattered religious centers across the Altiplano. Another interesting characteristic is that the lines do not seem to have been used for practical activities such as trade or warfare. Their paths cross difficult terrain, steep hills, and areas hard to access, ruling out their use as simple transport routes. The durability of the Sajama lines is remarkable. Their natural preservation is due to the dry climate, the low human activity in the region, and the composition of the soil, which has allowed the grooves to remain visible over time. Nevertheless, the lines face modern threats. Agricultural expansion, road construction, and other human activities pose risks that could alter or destroy parts of the network. For this reason, local and international organizations have proposed protection and documentation measures, recognizing their cultural and historical value. Unlike other great monuments of antiquity, the Sajama lines do not seek to impress through material grandeur. There are no walls, statues, or stone temples. Their greatness lies in the scale, in the invisible trace that can only be fully appreciated from the air or through high-altitude photography. This discreet, almost humble character is part of their charm. The Sajama lines do not impose their presence. Rather, they blend into the landscape, becoming part of the very nature of the Altiplano. Today, travelers crossing the region may walk over these ancient lines almost without noticing. Only by stepping back and observing carefully does one perceive the geometry crossing the fields, like scars from a sacred past still pulsing beneath the ground. The Aymara people, descendants of the cultures that once populated the Altiplano, preserve in their oral traditions stories of ancient roads, pilgrimage routes, and ceremonies honoring the Apis, the spirits of the mountains. These tales, though fragmentary, point to a profound spiritual connection between humans and their natural environment. The Sajama lines are, in essence, traces of that connection. Marks that outline not only the physical terrain but also the symbolic territory of a world where the landscape was an integral part of spiritual life. Without grand constructions, without dazzling monuments, the lines have withstood the passage of time. They remain, crossing the Altiplano silently, as mute witnesses of an era when walking and honoring the earth were inseparable acts. As the sun sets over the vast plain, casting long shadows across the fields, the Sajama lines continue their eternal course, invisible to many, but ever present for those who know how to look. the London Hammer, an artifact trapped in time. In 1936, near the small town of London in the state of Texas, United States, a family strolling through the countryside found something unusual. A small piece of rock with a metallic form protruding from it. Intrigued, they picked up the object and, upon closer inspection, realized they were holding what appeared to be an ancient hammer, partially embedded in solid stone. This discovery, known as the London Hammer, eventually became one of the so-called out-of-place objects or OOP artifacts that seem to defy conventional understanding of human history. The hammer has a simple appearance. It possesses an iron head, composed of high-purity metal, attached to a wooden handle that is partially fossilized. Its design is very similar to that of a modern hammer, used for everyday tasks such as driving nails or striking tools. The feature that has attracted the most attention over the years is that the rock in which it was encased has been dated, according to some reports, to around 100 million years ago, corresponding to the Cretaceous period. This apparent contradiction, a man-made object embedded in extremely ancient rock, has given rise to all sorts of speculations. Some proponents of alternative theories have suggested that the hammer could be evidence of ancient human civilizations far older than officially accepted. Others have proposed even more radical ideas, linking it to time travel or unknown influences. However, the most prudent scientific analyses offer less extraordinary explanations. A reasonable theory is that the hammer was not buried in ancient rock, but rather that a type of mineral concretion formed around it. In regions like Texas, natural processes of mineral dissolution and precipitation can rapidly harden sediment around an object, encasing it in a mass of stony material that, although appearing ancient, actually formed in a relatively short time. This phenomenon, known as rapid lithification, can explain how an object just a few hundred years old ended up encapsulated in what seems to be solid rock. The composition of the hammer's iron is another interesting aspect. Metallurgical analyses have shown it contains 96% iron, 2.6% chlorine, and a small percentage of sulfur. The purity of the iron and the presence of chlorine are unusual for modern manufacturing processes but not impossible, especially for a tool crafted artisanally in the 19th century. The partially fossilized wooden handle can also be explained. Partial fossilization can occur under very specific conditions, where minerals infiltrate and slowly replace organic matter in humid, mineral-rich environments, without necessarily requiring millions of years. Despite these explanations, the London Hammer remains a fascinating object. Not because it rewrites human history, but because it illustrates how natural processes can sometimes create situations that seem mysterious or impossible. The hammer has passed through several hands since its discovery. It is currently on display at the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas, where it is presented as a piece that challenges conventional geological dating. This exhibition has helped keep the hammer's fame alive, attracting both curious visitors and researchers seeking more grounded explanations. Beyond the controversies, the London Hammer stands out for its ability to capture the imagination. It reminds us that the natural world can surprise us, that seemingly simple objects can conceal complex stories, and that even small discoveries can spark great debates. In essence, the hammer represents the intersection between nature and human activity, an everyday tool caught within an unusual geological phenomenon. Today, geologists and archaeologists continue to use cases like that of the London Hammer to explain how hasty interpretation of a find can lead to misunderstandings. It is also a good example of how evidence must always be analyzed within its proper context, considering both natural factors and human actions. Meanwhile, for many, the hammer remains a symbol of mystery, a tangible reminder that even in the modern era, there are still discoveries that defy our expectations. Those who visit the museum where it is displayed can observe it up close, noting the details in the metal, the wear on the handle, and the texture of the stone surrounding it. They can imagine the surprise of those who found it and understand how a simple object can become the subject of global conversation. Sometimes, it does not take lost civilizations or impossible technologies to intrigue us. It takes only a forgotten tool, a little understood natural process, and human curiosity to keep the wonder alive. And so, under the glass cases of a small museum in Texas, the London Hammer continues to rest, a humble object that, without intending to, keeps fueling stories, hypotheses, and debates. A simple tool trapped within an extraordinary circumstance. The Hypogeum of Hal-Saflieni, the hidden labyrinth beneath Malta. In the heart of the island of Malta, beneath the surface of a modern neighborhood, lies one of the oldest and most enigmatic subterranean monuments in the world, the Hypogeum of Hal-Saflieni, a construction that defies imagination with its antiquity, its architectural complexity, and the mystery that still surrounds its original purpose. Discovered by accident in 1902, when workers were laying the foundations for new houses, the Hypogeum revealed a vast complex of chambers, corridors, and halls carved directly into the limestone bedrock. As archaeologists began to explore its passageways, they quickly realized they were not facing a mere natural cave, but a planned and deliberately constructed work of astonishing precision. The Hypogeum of Hal-Saflieni dates back approximately to the year 4000 before our era, during the Neolithic period. It is thus older than the pyramids of Egypt and many of the European megalithic monuments, an impressive achievement for a society that, according to historical records, did not yet know of metal tools or the wheel. The complex consists of 3 main levels, excavated at different depths. The upper level is the oldest, likely intended for initial ritual use. The middle level, more elaborately designed, contains the principal chambers, and the lower level, accessed through narrow passages, seems to have been used for storage or additional functions. The Hypogeum was built entirely by hand, using stone and bone tools. The builders shaped the rock with a mastery that surprises even today's experts. Carved pillars, vaulted ceilings imitating wooden architecture, and acoustic chambers that amplify sound, all elements suggesting advanced knowledge of engineering and meticulous attention to detail. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Hypogeum is its acoustic function. In the so-called oracle room, a man speaking in a normal tone can make his voice resonate throughout the entire underground complex. Some researchers believe this property was no accident, but deliberately designed for rituals or ceremonies involving the manipulation of sound. The Hypogeum has also revealed an impressive array of archaeological findings. Remains of more than 7,000 individuals have been discovered, along with offerings of pottery, beads, tools, and sculpted figures. Among these figures stands out the Sleeping Lady, a small, finely detailed statue of a woman reclining peacefully, seemingly in a state of deep rest or sleep. This figure, considered a masterpiece of prehistoric art, has fueled theories about the role of women in the religious cults of the time, as well as beliefs regarding death and the afterlife. The massive presence of human remains suggests that the Hypogeum functioned as a vast ossuary, a place where the dead were deposited in specific ceremonies. The arrangement of bones and the presence of ritual objects reinforce this interpretation. However, some details still resist simple explanation. Why build such an extensive and elaborately crafted complex solely for funerary functions? Might the Hypogeum have also served as a place of worship, of initiation, or as a subterranean sanctuary tied to broader beliefs about life, death, and rebirth? The passage of time has been harsh on the Hypogeum. Uncontrolled visits during the 20th century caused damage from humidity, mold, and contamination. Today, access is restricted to preserve the delicate environmental conditions inside. Only a limited number of visitors may enter each day, following carefully controlled routes that allow the complex to be admired without compromising its conservation. Despite these restrictions, exploring the Hypogeum is a unique experience. The darkness, the subtle echo of footsteps, the soft contours of the carved rock, together create an atmosphere that is difficult to describe. A tangible reminder that more than 5,000 years ago, human beings much like ourselves imagined, planned, and created this extraordinary space. The Hypogeum of Hal-Saflieni is not merely a technical achievement. It is also an expression of a worldview where life, death, and the sacred were intertwined in ways we are only beginning to comprehend. Without the need for grandiose monuments or boastful inscriptions, the Hypogeum speaks through its silence, its carefully sculpted darkness, and its spaces that invite introspection. Today, protected as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Hypogeum continues to be the subject of ongoing study. New technologies, such as laser scanning and microenvironmental analysis, allow researchers to slowly unravel more details about its construction and use. And although many questions remain unanswered, the mere fact that this monument has survived for so many millennia stands as a testament to the ingenuity, dedication, and imagination of those who created it. Those who visit the Hypogeum of Hal-Saflieni today, silently and respectfully, are not merely walking through an ancient monument. They are also drawing closer to the very memory of a civilization that, underground, inscribed one of the most fascinating chapters in human history. The Fuente Magna bowl, the artifact that should not exist. On the outskirts of La Paz, Bolivia, near the shores of Lake Titicaca, one of the most puzzling discoveries of the American continent took place. The Fuente Magna bowl, an ancient ceramic piece, seemingly ordinary at first glance, yet one that holds a mystery still sparking debate and controversy today. The Fuente Magna bowl was discovered accidentally during the 1950s, on an estate called Fuente Magna, from which it takes its name. At first, it was treated as a curious find, left forgotten among other minor artifacts. Only later, upon closer examination, did its most intriguing feature come to light. It was covered in strange inscriptions. The bowl is large, made of reddish-brown ceramic, decorated with reliefs of zoomorphic and anthropomorphic figures on its exterior. But the true enigma lies within, where a series of carefully engraved signs seem to form an organized system of writing. What is surprising is that the symbols inside the bowl do not resemble any known pre-Columbian writing system. Various researchers, both official and independent, have noted striking similarities with ancient Old World scripts, particularly Sumerian and other cuneiform writing from Mesopotamia. This observation has led to far-reaching theories. Some have suggested that the Fuente Magna bowl could be evidence of transoceanic contact between civilizations of America and the Middle East in ancient times, long before the known voyages of Europeans. Others, more cautious, argue that the similarities are coincidental and that the bowl was simply created locally, without direct connections to foreign cultures. In 1992, Bolivian researchers Bernardo Biados and Freddy Arce studied the bowl in detail. They claimed that part of the inscription seemed to correspond to a form of Proto-Sumerian writing, mixed with local symbols. According to their interpretation, the piece could be thousands of years old, reflecting an unprecedented cultural syncretism. However, their study was never published in international scientific journals, and the lack of controlled archaeological excavations at the original discovery site has left many questions unanswered. The context of the bowl's discovery further complicates the analysis. Since it was not found through formal excavation, it is difficult to establish the precise age of the object, its stratigraphy, or its relationship to other artifacts. Moreover, some archaeologists have pointed out that the piece could be a much more recent creation, perhaps from colonial times or later, imitating ancient styles either intentionally or by stylistic coincidence. Despite these warnings, the Fuente Magna bowl has captured the popular imagination. Its very existence raises fascinating questions about the possibility of ancient connections between cultures separated by entire oceans. Historically, the idea of pre-Columbian transoceanic contact has been met with skepticism. However, discoveries like the Fuente Magna bowl, though not definitive, open the door to reconsidering chapters of the past that we do not yet fully understand. Beyond the bold theories, the bowl itself is an object of great artistic value. The exterior reliefs depict figures that could represent gods, sacred animals, or symbols associated with fertility. The style, though different from other pre-Columbian cultures, reflects an expert hand and a clear ritual intention. Some details of the bowl, such as the precision of the internal engravings and the symmetry of the external design, indicate that it was not a utilitarian object. It most likely served a ceremonial purpose, perhaps related to rituals of water, fertility, or spiritual connection. Today, the Fuente Magna bowl is on display at the Museo de los Metales Preciosos in La Paz. Its presence continues to attract curious visitors, drawn both by its beauty and the mystery that envelopes it. From an academic perspective, most archaeologists insist on the need for more serious studies before making any definitive claims. Ceramic analysis, chemical studies of the pigments, and more exhaustive stylistic comparisons could shed more light on its true nature. Whatever its origin, the Fuente Magna bowl has already earned a place among the great archaeological mysteries. It stands as a reminder that sometimes a single object can challenge our certainties and open new questions about human history. For those who are passionate about ancient enigmas, the bowl represents the possibility of untold stories, tales of unknown travelers, improbable contacts, or simply the boundless human capacity to create complex symbols. Today, those who observe the bowl closely can appreciate not only its mysterious inscriptions, but also the work of anonymous hands that, centuries or perhaps millennia ago, shaped the clay with a purpose we are still trying to decipher. A simple object, yes, but one laden with questions. A fragment of history trapped in ceramic, waiting for someone, someday, to finally understand its true message. The North Lothagam Pillar Site, the forgotten cemetery of the desert. On the shores of Lake Turkana, in the arid north of Kenya, an archaeological discovery has begun to reveal secrets about one of the oldest cultures in Africa. The North Lothagam Pillar Site is a funerary monument that has puzzled researchers because of its size, its age, and the mystery surrounding its purpose. It was during the 1960s that explorers and archaeologists began to take an interest in the structure, although the most intensive excavations have been carried out in recent years. What they found was much more than a simple cluster of stones. It was a vast cemetery, built approximately 5,000 years ago, during a time when the environment was very different from the dry and desolate landscape we see today. Back then, the climate was more humid. Lake Turkana was fuller, and the surrounding areas were much greener, allowing communities of pastoralists and hunters to live relatively prosperous lives. In this context, the North Lothagam Monument emerged. A circle of standing stones surrounds a central mound, also covered with hundreds of carefully placed blocks of rock. Inside, archaeologists discovered human remains belonging to individuals of all ages and genders. The first surprise was the absence of visible hierarchies. Unlike other ancient funerary monuments, where graves often show clear differences between leaders and common people, at North Lothagam everyone seems to have been buried in the same manner. There are no signs that some individuals were treated with greater honor than others. This suggests that the community that built the site was relatively egalitarian, a group where collective identity prevailed over distinctions of rank or individual wealth. The remains found show that the people wore ornaments such as stone beads, necklaces, and bracelets made from seashells. These adornments, beyond their beauty, indicate the existence of trade networks that reached distant coastal areas. The construction of the monument was a monumental task. Moving large stones, arranging them into stable structures, and excavating the central mound must have required a tremendous investment of time, effort, and cooperation. Everything points to North Lothagam being a special place for its builders. Not simply a cemetery, but a gathering place, a ceremonial site, perhaps a location for collective memory. Interestingly, the site was used for several centuries. Successive generations returned to bury their dead in the same place, following traditions that remained alive for a long time. Analysis of the skeletal remains has also revealed interesting details about the lives of these ancient communities. The people of North Lothagam were robust, adapted to living in an environment that was beginning to harden due to progressive climate change. Diseases left their marks on the skeletons. Arthritis, healed fractures, signs of intense physical labor. But there is also evidence of longevity in some individuals, suggesting that despite hardships, they maintained relatively sustainable ways of life. The decline of the site seems to coincide with worsening climate conditions. As the region became more arid, living conditions deteriorated, forcing communities to disperse in search of new water sources and food supplies. Thus, North Lothagam was gradually abandoned. The desert winds covered the stones, and the memory of those who rested there faded into a whisper among the sands. Today, the site has regained interest thanks to modern excavations. Using techniques such as radiocarbon dating, three-dimensional scanning, and DNA analysis, archaeologists are slowly reconstructing the history of this ancient society. North Lothagam represents one of the oldest pieces of evidence of complex communities in sub-Saharan Africa. a reminder that early organized societies did not emerge only in Egypt or Mesopotamia, but also in lesser-known places. The importance of the monument goes beyond its age. It speaks to the human capacity to build, to remember, to honor those who have passed. And although the names and personal stories of those buried there have been lost, their legacy remains, inscribed in the stones they so carefully placed. Today, those who visit North Lothagam find an arid and lonely landscape. The stones, still standing after millennia, form a simple circle in the middle of the desert. There are no grand walls, no ostentatious inscriptions, only rocks, dust, and the echo of a civilization that knew how to honor its dead in a way that has endured through time. A silent place, but one filled with meaning. Another piece in the puzzle of our shared human history. The aluminium wedge of Aiud, the object that should not exist. In 1974, on the outskirts of Aiud, a small city in Romania, workers at an excavation site stumbled upon an unexpected discovery. Buried several meters deep, alongside the bones of a mastodon, they found a metallic object that immediately puzzled everyone. The Aiud wedge. The object, about 20 centimeters long and shaped like a wedge or a hammerhead, at first glance appeared to be a simple piece of oxidized metal. However, its composition turned out to be unusual. It was made primarily of aluminium, with small percentages of copper and silicon. This detail immediately sparked interest among researchers. Aluminium was not isolated as a pure metal until the early 19th century. Before that, its extraction was extremely difficult, as it does not occur freely in nature but is found combined in minerals such as bauxite. Thus, finding an aluminium object embedded in a geological layer tens of thousands of years old seemed impossible according to conventional knowledge. Subsequent analyses carried out in Romanian laboratories confirmed that the object had a high-purity metallic alloy, similar to those used in modern industrial applications. The surface showed signs of oxidation, as expected, but its internal structure suggested a sophisticated manufacturing process. The wedge's shape is also peculiar. It features a design reminiscent of components from modern machinery, with smooth curves and holes that seem to have been intended for fitting or assembling with other parts. All this immediately led to speculation. Could the Aiud wedge be evidence of lost technologies? A piece of machinery from unknown ancient civilizations? Or even, as some more daringly proposed, proof of extraterrestrial presence in prehistoric times? Of course, more earthly explanations soon emerged. One theory suggests that the object is not ancient at all, but rather fell accidentally into an older layer of earth, possibly due to ground movements, earlier excavations, or simple errors in archaeological interpretation. According to this view, the Aiud wedge would simply be a piece of modern machinery, perhaps part of an aircraft's landing gear or heavy industrial equipment, that somehow ended up mixed with ancient fossil remains. However, even this explanation does not resolve all the details. The lack of clear records regarding the exact context of the discovery, combined with the object's uniqueness, leaves room for mystery. The object has undergone various tests over the years, but none has offered a definitive conclusion. In some reports, it is claimed that the layer of oxide covering the wedge suggests considerable age. Others argue that the dating methods used were inadequate or that the oxide layer could have formed under particular conditions that accelerated the process. Today, the Aiud wedge is preserved at the History Museum of Transylvania, although it is not always on public display. For many visitors, it remains a symbol of the enigmas that, despite all our modern technology, continue to resist complete explanation. The object has been replicated and studied by independent researchers, some of whom have suggested that its design would fit better with parts from mid-20th century aviation industry components than anything else. Yet so far, no exact matching component has been identified. No known machine, whether from aviation or industrial sectors, seems to perfectly match the design of the Aiud wedge. This small detail fuels the ongoing fascination with the object. Although there is no conclusive evidence pointing to an extraordinary origin, there is also no completely satisfying explanation. The story of the Aiud wedge reflects a common pattern in many great archaeological mysteries. An object found outside its expected context, challenging established chronologies, and generating more questions than answers. Beyond extravagant theories or pragmatic explanations, the wedge continues to remind us that history, and especially archaeology, is often more complex than it appears. Sometimes, the simplest objects can become gateways to speculation and wonder. Today, as the wedge rests in its museum, it continues to draw the attention of researchers, the curious, and dreamers alike. It does not matter what the ultimate truth about its origin may be. What is certain is that this small piece of metal has managed to capture the imagination of generations, reminding us that even in an age of impressive scientific advances, there is still room for mystery. A simple piece of aluminium, lost in time, still inviting us to wonder what else might be hidden beneath the surface of the world we think we know. The Brazilian Geoglyphs, the hidden drawings of the Amazon. Deep within the state of Acre, in the western Amazon region of Brazil, lies one of the most intriguing archaeological discoveries of South America, the Brazilian geoglyphs. Gigantic geometric formations carved into the earth that for centuries remained hidden beneath the dense canopy of the rainforest. It was only during the final decades of the 20th century, with the rise of deforestation, that these figures began to come to light. From the air, pilots started to glimpse perfect patterns. Circles, squares, straight lines, and complex combinations traced upon the land's surface. At first glance, they could be mistaken for roads or agricultural fields. But upon closer inspection, their true nature is revealed. Monumental structures, some of which measure more than 300 meters in diameter. So far, more than 450 geoglyphs have been catalogued in the Brazilian Amazon, although it is believed that many more remain hidden beneath the forest. Their construction raises numerous questions. Archaeologists believe that these geoglyphs were made between the years 2000 and 1000 before the current era, long before the arrival of Europeans to the continent. The creation of these enormous figures would have required careful planning, as well as the mobilization of large numbers of people to excavate the trenches, which in some cases are several meters wide and up to 2 meters deep. This effort suggests the existence of organized societies, with social structures capable of coordinating large-scale collective work. And what is most surprising is that this organization arose in an environment long considered too hostile for the development of complex cultures. The Amazon, traditionally seen as a virgin jungle inhabited only by small nomadic groups, is beginning to reveal itself as a space where much more advanced societies flourished. The purpose of the geoglyphs remains a mystery. Some researchers suggest that they could have been ceremonial spaces, places of gathering for religious, political, or social rituals. Others think they may have served astronomical purposes, acting as giant calendars to mark the seasons or important celestial events. In some cases, evidence of wooden structures has been found within the geoglyphs, such as aligned posts that may have formed enclosures or light constructions. This reinforces the idea that the geoglyphs were not simply figures to be seen from the air but places that communities actively inhabited or used. The soils surrounding many geoglyphs show a special composition known as terra preta, or Amazonian black earth. This type of soil, artificially enriched with charcoal, organic remains, and other elements, is highly fertile and does not form naturally. The presence of terra preta indicates intensive and advanced agricultural practices, suggesting that the cultures who built the geoglyphs were not simple hunter-gatherers but well-established farming societies. These discoveries force a reconsideration of Amazonian history. Far from being an untouched jungle, it appears to have been home to dynamic cultures that actively modified their environment to thrive. Today, the study of the geoglyphs relies on modern technologies such as LiDAR, an aerial laser scanning system that allows researchers to see through dense vegetation. Thanks to LiDAR, researchers have been able to discover new figures and precisely map known structures. Radiocarbon dating of organic materials found in the trenches suggests that some geoglyphs were used for centuries, adapting and evolving over time. Although most of the geoglyphs feature basic geometric shapes, some display complex combinations that imply an advanced understanding of proportions and spatial design. This reinforces the idea that their creators possessed a high level of technical knowledge. As for the identity of those who built them, there is still no clear consensus. It appears that multiple cultural groups, rather than a single homogeneous civilization, were involved. What is clear, however, is that these peoples managed to construct an impressive legacy, using simple tools and a profound understanding of their environment. The protection of the geoglyphs is now a priority for archaeologists and environmentalists alike. Many of them are endangered due to agricultural expansion and uncontrolled deforestation. Each new discovery reminds us how fragile this heritage is. Once destroyed by human activity, it would be almost impossible to recover. Moreover, the geoglyphs represent a unique opportunity to learn about ancient Amazonian societies, their rituals, their social organization, and their relationship with nature. Visiting the geoglyph sites is not easy. Many are located in remote areas, accessible only by small aircraft or after long journeys on dirt roads. However, for those who manage to reach them, the view from the air is breathtaking. There, in the midst of what seems like an endless sea of green, perfect lines emerge, silent and majestic, mute witnesses of a past yet to be deciphered. The sensation they leave is not one of imposing grandeur, like pyramids or stone temples. It is more subtle, an intelligent, harmonious imprint, integrated into the landscape, respectful of the natural environment. The Brazilian geoglyphs are an invitation to rethink many preconceived ideas about the capabilities of ancient Amazonian peoples, about their relationship with the land, and about the depth of the legacy they left behind. They remain there, under the sun and rain, enduring the passage of centuries, reminding us that there is still much to discover in the world's greatest forests. The Baltic Sea Anomaly, the submerged mystery of the North. In June of 2011, while exploring the cold waters of the Baltic Sea, the Swedish marine exploration team Ocean X captured something unexpected on their sonar. At a depth of 90 meters, the device recorded an unusual formation. A massive circular structure, with shapes so precise that from the very first moment it sparked all kinds of speculation. The anomaly appeared to have a diameter of about 60 meters, with a clearly outlined structure that resembled a classic flying saucer, or, for some, a massive, intentionally built construction. As the images were analyzed, even more curious details emerged. The object seemed to have straight edges, steps, corridors, and forms that hardly appeared natural. Some observers even noted what they described as a track or path, extending behind the object, as if it had skidded before coming to rest. The news spread rapidly. Media outlets, mystery forums, and enthusiasts of the unexplained began theorizing. Some claimed it was the remains of a lost civilization, others that it was an extraterrestrial craft, while more pragmatic voices suggested an unusual rock formation. The Ocean X team returned several times to the site for further study. Upon approaching the anomaly, they reported electronic interference. Cameras that ceased functioning, compasses behaving erratically, and other strange effects. This phenomenon further fueled the aura of mystery surrounding the object. Samples of material were collected for analysis. Initial results indicated that the object was composed mainly of volcanic rocks such as basalt and granite, types of stone common in the region. However, the debate did not end there. The geometric structure of the object was not fully explained by typical geological processes. Scientists who have studied the case offer several plausible natural explanations. One theory holds that the anomaly could be a glacial moraine, a collection of rocks and sediments dragged and deposited by a glacier thousands of years ago. Glacial activity is known to create unusual structures on the seabeds of northern Europe. Another proposal suggests the object could be a basalt formation, the result of ancient volcanic activity. Under certain conditions, basalt can cool into relatively uniform geometric patterns, much like the famous basalt columns of Ireland. Nonetheless, the Baltic Sea is not known for active volcanism, and records of ancient volcanic activity in that region are scarce, raising reasonable doubts. Supporters of the artificial hypothesis point to several peculiar aspects: the almost perfect round shape, the apparent internal and external symmetry, and some structures resembling carefully carved steps or passages. Added to this is the mysterious track or groove seemingly connecting to the object, suggesting, for some, movement or a controlled impact. In the realm of alternative hypotheses, other theories have also been proposed, such as an ancient underwater base, remains of a previously unknown prehistoric civilization, now submerged, an artifact of non-terrestrial origin, fallen to Earth thousands of years ago. These ideas, while intriguing, still lack concrete proof. The Baltic Sea, due to its geological and climatic characteristics, presents a difficult environment for investigation. Underwater visibility is poor because of suspended sediments, and the sea's currents and cold temperatures complicate prolonged diving operations. Despite these challenges, new expeditions have managed to obtain clearer images of the anomaly. What they reveal is a rough surface, not completely smooth, and certain irregularities that scientists say are consistent with natural rock formations subjected to glacial erosion. Other elements have also emerged from the analysis. In nearby zones, fragments of fossilized wood have been found, possibly indicating the remains of ancient sunken ships, but no direct evidence of human manufacturing has been associated with the main object. In 2018, a private expedition used remote-operated underwater vehicles to map more details of the anomaly. Most of the data collected supports the geological formation theory, though not all doubts have been settled. Some features remain difficult to explain solely by glacial action. The marked symmetry of certain contours, the parallel grooves that seem designed rather than formed at random, and the orderly distribution of loose rocks over the structure. The Ocean X team, for its part, has maintained a cautious stance. They do not claim the object is artificial, but they insist it is not a simple accumulation of common rocks. Meanwhile, interest in the Baltic Sea anomaly remains alive. Documentaries, special reports, and theories ranging from scientific to speculative have continued to emerge. Today, the object remains in place, 90 meters beneath the surface, in a cold and silent environment. Some scientists are planning future, more detailed expeditions with improved technology to create a complete three-dimensional mapping that might finally solve the mystery. Until then, the Baltic Sea anomaly remains one of those modern enigmas that, beyond technical explanations or extraordinary tales, continues to captivate the imagination of all who hear about it. A solitary object, immobile under the weight of the northern waters, waiting for someone to unlock its true story. And so, among ancient stones, lost civilizations, and impossible artifacts, we reach the end of our journey. If you enjoyed exploring these mysteries with me, don't forget to subscribe and show your support so we can continue uncovering more secrets of the past. Rest well, and remember, there are still many enigmas waiting to be revealed.